Have you ever wondered why this certain area in your life is not being fulfilled? Just this one area. You always go back and forth to this one area and you can't seem to get it fulfilled or get that area right. Well, I want to share with you the power of focus. And oftentimes we share about focus in a positive light, but in this episode, I want to share with you how your focus on the thing that you do not have or the thing that isn't correct in your life yet is derailing the rest of your life. So there's a quote by Myron Golden, who I absolutely love and adore and follow his channel, his teachings, and things of that nature. So he says, lack can only exist in my experience if it first exists in my expectation or the expectation of the person that is responsible for me. So I'm going to read that again. Lack can only exist in my experience if it first exists in my expectation or the expectation of the person that is responsible for me. That is a quote by Myron Golden. The reason you experience lack is because you focus on the lack. There is way more abundance than there is lack. And so how does this apply to my life? You may be asking, Wanza, right? So in Genesis, the 2nd chapter, we see that God tells Adam, listen, you have all these trees in the garden. You have all these trees that you can eat from, but don't eat of this particular tree, right? And so then Eve comes along. The serpent has a conversation with Eve. She's convinced to eat from this particular tree that God tells Adam not to eat from. She was focused on the thing that they could not do, right? And oftentimes, we focus on what we cannot do or what we do not have. And so I have some notes here that I wrote down. I also have my Bible behind me. So if you see me grab that, that's what I'm doing. So your focus, the power of focus can derail your life if you are focusing on that area in which you lack. It can destroy your relationships. It can destroy the vision that God gave you. It's so powerful when we focus on that one thing that we do not have, and we're trying to get that thing, not realizing that it's derailing our lives. So these are some of the notes that I wrote down. You have everything except the house. You have everything except the baby. Those of you who know me know I teach a lot about infertility defeated. I was once infertile and God blessed us with children. But you can live a miserable life without a baby because you are focused on trying to conceive and you don't see the other blessings that you have in your life. It's really a wicked device from the enemy to have you focus on what you don't have, and it actually derails the rest of your life. Another example is you can have everything except good credit, right? You can have everything except good credit. And so you need good credit in order to get this house. And so you're upset that you don't have good credit. And then because you don't have good credit, you can't get approved for the house. However, this is what God revealed to me. When you are focusing on what you do not have, you miss what you do have. Because you don't have good credit right now, you may have enough skill to make enough money to buy a house cash. But because you are not focusing on the abundance in what you do have, you're focusing on what you don't have. So let me say this in another way. For example, you want to buy a house and you don't have the credit to buy the house, right? Your credit is bad for whatever reason. Maybe, like my husband and I, we had this, one of our student loans, his student loans, it was an error, but there were like nine transactions or 9 inquiries, and then his credit it plummeted, right? It went down, but it was all on an error. But of course, it's going to take months to get that back into place. So now the credit score goes down. You're not approved for the house, so you can't get the house. However, you have the skill, you have the business, you have a writing business, you have a coaching business, you have a fairly good job that you make fairly great money. And you have a skill, a talent, and an ability that God has given you that will generate you more money in order to pay for a house cash. And you may say, like, Wanza, is that really possible? Absolutely, it's possible. Absolutely, it's possible. Whereas you're stuck worried about getting your credit straight, whereas you can be focused on the thing that you do have. What do I have that can get me this house in the next 6 months? What skill do I have? What skill do I have that can get me this house in the next year? Right? And so we have to think about the things that we do have and not what we don't have. Let's go back to the example with infertility. So because I talk with a lot of women who are challenged, I like to say challenged and not suffering, challenged with infertility. You have a great husband, but you don't recognize it because you don't have the baby yet. You have a great house, but you don't appreciate it because you are focused on the thing that you do not have at the moment. So how can we reverse this? How can we focus on the abundance in order to get the area in which we lack? So if you have a great husband, you have a great home, are you in relationship with your husband? Are you intimate with your husband? Are you focusing on building a relationship with your husband that will withstand the years of parenting? Because parenting is not easy at all, and parenting can actually put a stress on your relationship when a baby does come. So the power of focus. You have to focus on the abundance. You have to focus on what is good. Marital relationships, right? I've been married 20 years, almost 20 and a half years. They haven't all been great years or great days, but how do you get from year 1 to year 20 or year 1 to year 2? You focus on the good things that your spouse has. If you keep focusing on the negative, if you keep focusing on what your spouse is not doing, your spouse will always not do something that you don't like. And that will lead to resentment and ultimately probably divorce, or you'll live miserably for the next 20 years and you don't have to. So focus on what God has already given you. What has He put in your hand to make money? What has He put in your hand to better the relationship that you have with your spouse or your loved ones or your parents or your children? Don't focus on the things that make you sad and make you miserable. And that is a device of the enemy, because you know why? Because when you are not ungrateful, I don't want to say ungrateful, but when you are miserable in your spirit, you lose focus of the things that God has for you at that moment. Perhaps you are trying to conceive, right? But because you are so focused on the lack of not having a child, you won't build the business, or you won't build the ministry, or you won't do the next level of the job because you are very focused on not having this child. I've seen relationships dissipate. Relationships, I want to say like going to the toilet, but I don't know if that's the right phrase I should be using. But relationships destroyed because they were trying to create something that they did not have instead of cherishing what they did have in order to create what they did not have. Did y'all catch that? When we focus on the abundance, when we focus on what God has given us, when we focus on what we already have and how we can multiply it, somehow God makes a way and He fills in all the gaps of lack. He fills in all the areas that we do not have with joy, with peace, with love, with satisfaction. So I want to encourage you today. Do not focus on what you do not have. Focus on what you have. My favorite scripture, in Myron Golden, he also mentions this, and I have taught from this scripture a lot. 2 Kings, the 4th chapter. The woman with the pot of oil. She did not value what she had. Maybe I won't say she didn't value it, but she didn't recognize that it could become what she needed it to be. What she already had in her house was able to fulfill, to satisfy the lack, the debt that she needed to cover. So a lot of times you already have what you need to fulfill that area of lack. So you have to reverse that thing and not focus on the lack, but focus on what you have and let that multiply. And then that multiplication will satisfy that area of lack. I hope that this has blessed your life. Be sure to comment, subscribe, and of course, share. And I will see you in the next video.